Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Tabitha Graves. I'm the Community Enablement Manager for AWS Game Tech, and I have here with me the amazing Chris Finch.
Yeah, maybe not amazing exactly, but I'm definitely a solutions architect, as you mentioned, and an evangelist for game tech at AWS. I really do want to mention that I appreciate everyone in the audience giving us your time today. We're here to talk about what LiveOps is and how you can use it to engage your players, keep them around, make them enjoy the game that you've made for them. Which is a topic that is, as a game designer for myself, a big important one, and I hope it's one that's of interest to everyone here as well. So I will stop talking with no further ado. Tabitha, would you like to take it away?
Now, LiveOps can significantly impact the player experience in the game that you are creating. It also takes very careful planning and coordination on the back end to create that impactful experience for your players. So we're going to begin.
Yay, Fortnite. We're going to talk about Fortnite.
We're not going to talk about Fortnite. Well, we're going to talk about them for a second. So the Black Hole event last year was the largest live event in games. More than 7 million people watched across all social platforms. On Twitch alone, there was 1.7 million concurrent viewers. And to stay relevant right now, LiveOps is absolutely critical, and having that part of your game development cycle is important. And it's not just important to the players, but who expect fresh content and live events, but also streamers now who need new content to fuel their ecosystem as well.
Yeah, that's very true. And while it is important to acknowledge the success with Fortnite when you talk about LiveOps, because they credit LiveOps with some of their big successes, it's just as important to acknowledge you don't need to be as big as Epic or have as many players as Fortnite to get results from incorporating LiveOps into your game. Butterscotch Shenanigans, for example, they recognize the games industry is a crowded and competitive place, which is something we all know because that's where we work. And these guys leverage LiveOps practices to gain a competitive advantage in that space. They actually use backend automation via website APIs and serverless compute, specifically AWS Lambda, to help them locate and build daily challenges for their players. So it's content that's synthesized from official content and user-generated content. And this happens regularly on a daily schedule, so that players always know when to look for something new. And that's important because when they always know when to look for something new, they come back to look for it. So that's how they keep their engagement high.
Now, we're going to look at a LiveOps flywheel that we created. So you see in the center, it starts with player engagement. It's at the center of everything. And you'll see that the examples that we just discussed were basically culminations of experiences rooted by player engagement in those games. So basically, all of those, the player engagement in the middle is revolved by the user experience. So at the highest level, each game is fueled by a cycle of design and development decisions. So you see design is at the top, development is at the bottom. As players are playing the game that is launched, whether it's in full production, alpha, beta, the players then engage with that content, and then you start collecting data. So player data, game data, and then you're able to analyze that and then make adjustments and pivot to that information, continuing the cycle of design and development. Now, player engagement is at the center of everything, and LiveOps is simply the bridge that connects the players and the developers to the players to let them know that they are listening.
Right. And I mean, so ultimately you're looking at how do I know what my players are doing and how do I know what makes them happy, right? And as a developer, the important takeaway here is that for this to work, you really need to have LiveOps built into your game design from day one, right? You can't incorporate player feedback into your design iteration if you don't have it. And the best way to understand if people are engaging with your game is to analyze the data they generate while they're playing it. And some of the most important considerations you're going to be making for these players is going to be the first couple of cohorts of people who play your games. That feedback is going to be super important. So if you're not collecting that data, if you're not analyzing that data, you're not getting it into your design from day one, you're missing out on a lot.
Yeah, that's correct. And there's no community consensus of what defines LiveOps. So what we did is, and what we're going to discuss today is basically the pillars that we found to be most consistently called out by the game dev community. So let's jump into the first one with community building. Now, community building is a little bit different, and we saw in the example above with utilizing Epic Games with Fortnite with something like a live event. But community building in general is fostering that community through social dashboards, specific team objectives, basically getting those players to come together and explore the game with their friends. So in the case of the live events that we discussed, something like that, you need, in order to handle something like that, you need, without over provisioning, you need something that would be able to scale up, scale down, and really meet the demands and handle that traffic of your players. So something, like on-premises servers is a good example of one way that you can handle something like that. With AWS, Amazon EC2, with auto scaling, you're actually able to set it up and it'll scale up and down, and it'll scale as people are connecting to your server. So it really it is able to meet those demands.
Yeah, and the important thing there as well is that it's not, it's about saving you money by not having hardware lying around that you're not going to use, but at the same time, it's also making sure your player experience is great. Because if you don't
Yeah,
have enough hardware, you can't always necessarily guess that you're going to be the next big hit. And I hope everybody here makes the next great big hit, right?
Yeah,
But
it
if you
allows you
are,
to
yeah,
not over provision, which we saw a lot, back in the day using on-premises servers. It's hard to tell how many resources you actually need, where this is pay as you go and pay for what you actually use.
yeah, cool. So why is economy monitoring here? Well, one of the things that's important about your game's community is actually its in-game economy. For games, especially that allow in-game trade or auctions, a lot of players love this kind of interaction as a source of enjoyment, and other players learn to depend on them, whether they know their names or not, to provide the market for rare bulk goods within their game. And understanding how the drops in your game affect that economy is really critical to maintaining a healthy in-game community, as well as managing your financial expectations, like from IAP, when those drops can be both farmed and bought from an in-game store, right? So understanding that economy web can be super, super tough, though, because it's all really interrelated and meshed, and it's kind of, really convoluted. You got to farm Boss X to get Phoenix Beaks as drops, and then buy Miracle Water from the stores so you can create a Sword of Hacking, so you can farm Boss Z to get Owlbear Claws. All these relationships get hard to track as they start to cascade together, and then it gets even tougher as they start to release new content and try to make older content more accessible to new players, because you're adding more layers to that web of interconnectivity, and it gets tough. And in fact, with IAP involved, you can actually find yourself in a situation where your economy is creating a loop where people can farm something and make way more money than they should be making, even to the point where it's messing up your IAP income. So one creative way of solving this problem we've seen has been to let the designer model the economy almost live, really, in a graph database. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar, think of a graph database as basically a big 3D model, right? So every vertex is like a chunk of data. And then every line between them, every edge describes a relationship between that connected data. And then inside every vertex, you can have all sorts of little attributes and metadata and stuff like that. And the edges can be pretty restrictive. But that's what a graph database does. Why that's useful is it's really, really fast and efficient at showing that kind of connected data, at showing the relationships between pieces of data. So you could actually use a graph database to store all those items and their relationships to each other, and then make a query like, show me all the connections to the Sword of Hacking, and you'd see the beaks and the water, and Boss X connected to the beaks, and Boss A connected to what the sword needs to do. So you'd see all these things like in one shot, as opposed to having to play test over and over to understand how they affect each other. And then as you tweak the drop rates when you get new content, and you can actually see the effect of that all across your economy. So it takes what is often an organic process to kind of check out what's going on in your economy, makes it much more systemic, much easier to automate, right? Lets you tweak and see the numbers across the entire economy. Now, as far as the solution is concerned, you can always build your own graph database on a server or an EC2 instance. There are plenty of open source solutions out there that you can use for that. If you're not interested in handling the infrastructure yourself, you can always use something like Amazon Neptune, which manages the infrastructure for you while you can manage the game data.
And the third part of community building is social campaigns. So with social campaigns, like social dashboards, as you are creating new content, launching your game, or maybe it's a different, campaign, you want to see and get a handle of how the community is feeling about it. So being able to have that type of sentiment management, you're able to predict and actually see like an overarching view of what everyone is saying online through forums or through their other communities. So one way of pulling out this sentiment analysis and creating an actual like social dashboard is going to be through natural language processing. So that's, one of the open AI or open services that you can use to find insights and relationships. We have a service called Amazon Comprehend, and that's a natural language processing service that you don't have to build your own infrastructure for. It is pay as you go. It's one of our managed services. And you're able to see the different results from the campaigns that you were working on and really get behind and see the actual community sentiment.
Yeah, real quick as well, one of the nice things about a tool like natural language processing is it doesn't just show you sentiment behind what people are saying, but it also highlights keywords, things that are being repeated over and over again. So you can have it, give yourself a daily report and page through and see what your community is talking about, not just how they feel, and as well how they feel about it. So that's actually a really good. Comprehend is a great tool for that. So in addition to all of the cool community stuff, you also need to know what your players are doing inside your game. Super important, because that's how you get your raw data. That's how you get your unvarnished data, right? People don't always necessarily know what they like when they're talking about it, but they know when they're doing it. So understanding how your players are interacting inside your game is super important. So one of the things you want to do that is to encourage them to play the game in ways that others like them have enjoyed it, right? So we're going to talk briefly about recommendation engines as a way to get people to do things they enjoy. Now, recommendations often get a kind of a categorization as, oh, that's only for IAP. And that's certainly true. If you are creating profiles of people and how they purchase stuff in your in-app purchase store, you can certainly say, okay, people who played the game like you also purchased this thing. So that's certainly a way to go about it, sure. But you don't get pulled into thinking that you're stuck with IAP recommendations only when you're dealing with a recommendation engine. You can use a recommendation engine to suggest anything to a player that they or their character can possess or consume. So get out of the mindset of just thinking about the shop, right? You can also do it to say you've got a game that's got quests, and it looks like you enjoy a stealth approach. Well, what you can do is you can check out, okay, other players who also played the game like you with stealthy approach stuck this quest line out to the very end because they enjoyed it. Maybe you should give it a go. So it doesn't have to be an IEP recommendation. It can be a quest recommendation engine, a little, critter, a little gremlin floating in your ear saying, hey, this guy over here's got a quest. I think you might like it. So your player goes over there. It helps direct their behavior towards stuff they're going to enjoy. By the same token, you could point players towards items that enhance their performance. If there's a quest line or an activity that can wind up with something that will help how they play, you can point them to that. If you've got a top PvPer and they get to this point in the quest line and they abandon ship, what you can do is maybe create a secondary objective, say, hey, I know you're trying to do this kind of thing. Go to this line and get to this point, and then, kind of move on from there. But this will actually get you where you want to go. So you can, again, you're starting to drive player behavior towards the things they want to do and stop wasting their time doing things that they're not going to feel rewarded doing. As always, you can do this in one of two ways. You can run your own recommendation engine on your own hardware, or you can use Amazon Personalized, which is a fully managed, it's basically an API which handles hardware configuration and maintenance, and provides you with a single API to query against to kind of solve all those issues.
For another strategy for measuring and responding to player behavior is going to be looking at threats. So looking at what does normal not look like, or what does not normal look like, sorry. And you're able to detect anomalies and respond to those different threats that might impact your game. Something like that is either, fraud detection, maybe player management, player abuse, something like that. You're able to do this actually through through AIML, enabled to detect those anomalies. So something like identifying specific player behavior, or maybe it's like a general trend. So you don't actually know what you're looking for, but you're just looking for a blanket of something that is wrong or something that is abnormal. But you're able to do this for AIML frameworks. One that we have is SageMaker. And that's a fully managed service again, and it provides the ability to build, train, deploy, and deploy all those machine models very quickly.
Yeah, just a real quick side note on that. SageMaker is definitely one of our more advanced tools. And again, pattern matching is really about patterns, right? machine learning is about patterns, about detecting patterns, responding to patterns. So when we're talking about threat detection, you're talking about looking at, as Tabitha mentioned, anomalies and kind of groupings, and being able to report on that and seeing those anomalies or groupings before you start getting reports from players is what you're trying to do here. You're trying to solve the problem before it becomes a problem, and that's what it can help you with. And then, what is a live procedural engagement? So one of the things you're going to be doing if you're doing this live ops thing and you're collecting lots of data on your players, is you're going to be getting a lot of data from them, right? So you need some kind of a pipeline to be able to accept that data and dump it someplace so you can do analysis on it. That's really the basic piece of live ops, is collecting the data and then analyzing the data. You'll need a pipeline for that. You can use something like Kafka. You can use something like Amazon Kinesis. Whether you want to manage it yourself, whether you want Amazon to manage it, entirely up to you. But all of these solutions are really about being a central port where you can jet lots of data at it and it'll go someplace where you can work on it. Now, there's two ways to deal with that data once you've got it. One of them is to kind of look it over on a regular basis, run analysis, do spreadsheets, do charts and stuff like that, and say, okay, I see a lot of people are not interacting with my new content. I wonder why, and then kind of going in and seeing who is and what at what point they're leaving. The data tells you that, right? One of the things you can do, though, is since you have that data passing through, you have the opportunity with a tool like Kinesis Analytics to look at the data as it's passing through the pipeline at like points at windows in time, right? So what I can do in near real time is find either anomalies, like we talked about before with machine learning. Anomalies and groupings are really easy to detect. So if I detect an anomaly and I'm getting geographical data on where my player is in a zone, I can say, okay, this player's out in the middle of nowhere. That's interesting. What's he doing? I can kind of look and see what he's doing. I can throw an alert to the system, and if the system then has code to tell it how to engage a player who's gone off on his own, is doing his own thing, maybe a dynamic encounter, maybe an encounter with an NPC that you've wanted to have, but only to a very specific small group of people. You can also do groups of people. I've detected an ad hoc group of people over here by this city. You can launch an encounter at them. So you can actually do not just reactive design iteration like we talked about early in the process, but you can actually react to players in how they're playing the game right as they're playing it and engage them, and then give them more options to play as making in a way to make the world more alive as they're playing it. So that's your live procedural engagements. Again, the tools you're going to look at either something like a Kafka, a real-time analytics pipeline, or Kinesis, which allows you to manage that stuff, so you don't have to.
And our last pillar is going to be new content and features. And all of this, this last pillar is actually a culmination of the two pillars that came before. So through community building, analysis of the sentiment and everything that's going on, to managing and measuring player behavior, looking at the effects of everything. The new content and features is the effect of analysis and everything of those. So for the first one with promotions, you're looking at something like seasonal events. So if your game has, an esports capability to it, to where you have different seasons, or maybe you have in your game, different holidays, you want to be able to see and promote and differentiate those type of events from, other times during the year. Something like an event calendar for players that you can create with different campaigns. But with promotion, it's all about, push notifications. So sending notifications of updates or patches maybe that are happening, maybe real-time leaderboards. You wanted to make sure that they get those notifications. So with a push notification service, they're able to get that real time or whenever they log on to the client. Something that one of the services that we have is Amazon Pinpoint. And what that is it sends out push notifications, but it also has analytics on the back end. It has a fully customizable dashboard, and you can actually have player segmentation with that dashboard. So what that means is if you wanted to notify if your game has different classes, mage, druid, warrior, you can have predictive segmentation of notifying maybe one class if something changed, if it's a card game and something changed on that card game, maybe some cards aren't allowed anymore. You're actually able to send only to those people that utilize those classes. So you can actually have different user groups and segment your players that way. Or if you wanted, you can send a broad message to everybody.
Cool. So this is probably not going to be much of a surprise to anybody. But you need to develop fast to release fast. You know, people are talking about multiple releases in a day sometimes even. Getting those releases out fast and without error is super, super critical into engagement. The second you start doing releases that aren't, where you're missing your deadlines or where you're allowing bugs to filter in that are part of the build process, you start losing the trust of your players and you start losing your engagement and your community, and it all stinks. So getting those releases out fast is critical. So a lot like when we talked originally about the flywheel and building live ops into your game from day one, building continuous integration and continuous delivery mechanisms into your process from day one can really save you a lot of headaches. Now, for those of you that aren't aware, CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, is about automating the process, right? It's about automating the build process, the test process, and the deployment process, so that you're not just pushing the button to get the build and then having to do all these manual things to get it out there to people. You're pushing the button and it's going to all the places where people can get automatically. So there's a bunch of different steps to it, right? Pipeline automation helps to reduce error from your process, since you're not manually copying files, moving things to multiple destinations and so forth. So be sure you're building CI/CD in from day one. It's going to be as simple as having a tool like Jenkins running the build processes and depositing your artifacts in the right targets. But if you build it from day one, you're in a much better place. And that is really super critical to be able to handle the requirements for people that are playing modern games. You know, they expect to see fast bug fixes. They expect to see responsive developers. And you guys want happy players, so you want to do that too. So taking the time to build CI/CD into your build process early on is really worth the investment. Again, doing it early allows you to build the community too, because you're showing your early adopters that, hey, you know, I'm responsive, I can work this, I'm going to be able to give you what you want in a very timely fashion. So this is all super important stuff. So build it in from day one. In addition to the Jenkins and Chef and all the other usual CI/CD tool sets, you know, consider something like AWS Code Pipeline, which is a managed CD service that allows you to automate those pipelines, which lets you deliver working updates to your players quickly and efficiently. It also helps automate the testing process, so those errors that can fall through as a result of build process will get caught and will actually go out live to your players.
And just like fast development is important, so are fast updates. So, you know, patches, downloadable content, anything that's new and exciting, you want it super fast and delivering after your launch. You're able to do that with a content delivery network. So one of the services that we have is Amazon CloudFront. It globally distributes that content with low latency, high transfer speeds. We have things called edge locations around the world that are specifically designed to be at where your players are playing. So to deliver those type of experiences that they're expecting, to have all of the updates on the development that you've been working so hard on. So going back, you know, we talked about the flywheel in the beginning, and we always like ending with the flywheel again. We understand that your world revolves around your players and creating those unique experiences for your players in your game. And hopefully you learned a few ways of creating those experiences for both your player community and also for your team making your game.
Good. Yeah, thanks everybody. Really appreciate it. Those email addresses are there for real. They are definitely to be used. Feel free to reach out to us. We love talking to game developers. I've been an indie since Show Me the Codes on Dark Basic. If any of you know what that was, I'm sorry, but I was there for that. So I love the community. I love participating. And I love talking about this endlessly. So feel free to reach out anytime you like.
Thank you very much, guys. That was fantastic. I mean, I've got a few questions. There's a few questions coming in. I'll chuck one at you. We put continuous development into actually Unity ads right the early, very early on. But I do know that is something that does take a real mind shift in terms of the development team. What would you say are the biggest kind of pitfalls to try and avoid when you make that change? From kind of like batch release to continuous release.
For game developers especially, I mean, we just want to get stuff out there, right? We are one of the few groups of developers that is universally and truly passionate about the stuff we do, right? We make cool games and we really want people to play those cool games. So a lot of the time we resist process because it seems to get in the way. It gets between the fun part and the fun part, right? You've got this fun part over here, which is building the game. You get the fun part over here, which is people developing the game. And if I can just give them the game, I can not worry about all that crap and not spend this time up front building the CI/CD pipeline, right? it's super tempting to do that. And I mean, if you know what, even if you expect to only ever have 5 people play your games, there's a chance that 1 million people might play your game. You know, you never know when the next hit is coming from, and it could be you. You know, it's not amazing odds. There's a lot of people that, you know, that don't do hits, that stick around doing a couple of games a year for a small group of players and love it, and that's fine too. There's nothing wrong with that approach. But if you do wind up with the players, you want to be able to support them, because ultimately, again, you want people to enjoy your game. So the big pitfall, it's in your head, right? It's in the get past the, okay, I just want to do it. I understand you just want to do it. Just do it this way, and you can actually end up doing it faster. Push the darn button, right?
Well, with games, for me personally, it's more a case of I don't want the dev team to touch it. I want the live ops team to do it. And I mean, it's the same. It's just I push the pipeline back a bit. To me, that's more about release to user.
Sure.
You getting stuff into the cloud, ready to go, and then managing the consumer experience independently.
Yep, absolutely.
Massive, and that saves you a whole bunch of pain when things go wrong as well. So let me just go, if you don't mind, I'm going to go to questions.
Sure.
So will Amazon leverage its DSP to create a robust ad network for gamers or gaming, similar to what Unity already has? Here are my former Unity ads going, what? But yes, I'll have to ask that question. That's the job of a compere. So what do you think about that? Is Amazon going to come up with a an ad network based on games?
You know, that's a really good question. I don't have any information on that currently. I mean, if you look at how what we provide tends to be solutions oriented, right? You know, if you look at everything we've ever provided from the Amazon Web Services portfolio, we're looking at things where we provide technology that we've used ourselves, right? So, you know, we provided EC2 because we provided S3 because we needed global, you know, storage that was accessible, you know, across the world. We provided all these AI services that are on the API level because we recognize that not everyone's a data scientist, but people still need the insights available through machine learning. So while I know it's a crappy answer to that question, I don't really know the answer to that question. But I would assume that if we do, it'll be based on something that we've done and has been successful enough that we think our customers can use it.
And let's face it, I think Unity Ads is still a customer, and a lot of it is run off your servers anyway. So, but that's just I haven't been there for 2 years, so don't quote me on that. You may have all changed. I was last there. So thank you very much for that one. The next one is: can you share a dashboard of how a graph, what a graph database looks like? Sure.
Yeah. Actually, if you look at the Neo4j is one of the big 2 graph databases that are out there. I've got a page actually. Okay. Can I link a page somewhere? Can I send you? You
should be able to share screen so if you can pull the page up onto a web browser, then you should be able to share that window, and then that should hopefully just work.
Where's my share screen? Hold on a second. Yeah. Oh no, technology.
You can share your screen, but you can also share a window in Zoom, which is quite
perfect. Where is the share screen thing on this side? Oh, share. Big green button, of course.
It's funny how the big green button is always something you miss, but that's a UX problem you always have to deal with.
All right, so here's the page. If you look at Neo4j, it's actually it's Neo4j Developer Graph Visualization. They actually have, I know you use cookies. They have tools that let you do that. So this is kind of what you're looking at when you're looking at a graph database, right? This is their visualization tool.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, that's what it's. You can get these things that are much more complex than that and aren't so obviously radial aligned and pleasant to look at. A lot of things are messy as heck, right? Because you're dealing with a lot of things that are connected to a lot of things that are also. It's more like a big meshy thing of goo, actually, when you look at it. But this is a good example of a nice, simple one that's easy to understand and follow. And if you're interested in this topic, I love graph databases. I've been using them for lots of stuff for a lot of time now. It's a great way to deal with relationships between players, players to classes, to guilds, to each other, to friends lists, to all that kind of stuff, to understand how people group and interact with each other. You can get some great insights using graph databases without machine learning, let alone when you can actually add machine learning to play. But that's what you're looking at when you're looking at a graph database. And again, if you want to talk about them at length, hit me up on my email address. I'll be more than happy to chat.
So I've got 2 questions left, and we've got 2 minutes left. So let's see how we go. Do you have any examples of how clients use game tech in the past?
Oh gosh, so many. Yes.
That's why I
Sorry.
was nervous about asking that one.
Yeah. I mean, I'm kind of flat-footed because I don't have a lot of our case studies in the back in front of my head. Like I know we did for Honor used GameLift, for instance, to handle matchmaking and multiplayer. GameLift is one of our larger multiplayer services. We have folks using our backend services. I'm struggling right now because I don't have our references off the top of my head. Tabitha, you got anyone offline? I mean, Butterscotch Shenanigans, which we talked
Yeah,
about, which we talked about.
we talked about Butterscotch Shenanigans. I know on our blogs, the AWS Game Tech blog specifically, we invite customers to write about their experiences and we post them on our blog. So if you're looking for something like that, that would be a great resource to go and view high level, all sorts of different games from, a couple person studios to AAA studios. There's so many use cases around everybody.
Yeah, and so I'm looking at, if I'm looking at our Capcom uses us, Gearbox uses us. Capcom did it with containers and NoSQL databases. There's a bunch of stuff on the site. It's aws.amazon.com/gametech. We have all sorts of customer stories you can look at there.
I'm a huge fan of containerization. It's like, just the whole idea of it just blows my mind because I'm old enough to have done
Remember?
it. Oh, well, right. So this is how old I am. Back in like '98, we did what we think was the first ever rack system. We literally soldered laptop boards to run Quake servers.
That's awesome.
Quite serious. This is BT, British Telecom. We did some ridiculous stuff back in the day to run a thing called Wireplay, which was a dial-up modem-based online gaming platform. So yes, I've been there. So the idea of containerization compared to running massive Sun Minis or laptop-based rack systems, it's like such a huge journey.
Oh, we're in such a cool world for multiplayer right now. You're absolutely right. Containers are, you're running one or two when there's a couple of people online. You're running, 1,000 of them when you get your spikes and you have your events and you've got a brand new hit. It takes care of itself. It's so nice.
Exactly. It makes life so much easier.